Great. Welcome everyone to our lunchtime learning sessions. Over the next couple of months, we're covering topics and sharing skills around the theme of adaptation. Today, we have two expert speakers sharing their knowledge with us and giving a bit of a Forth Valley setting for some of the solutions that we'll cover. Please do keep an eye out on our Eventbrite page, and that will also give you a list of some of the other themes that are coming up. Also, I'll drop a link in the chat, but wanting to highlight our free membership that is up on our website, free for individuals, community groups. That is also a good way to keep ahead of what events and things we have coming up and stay informed with what's happening in Forth Valley's Climate Action Hub. So I am Steffi. I'm part of the Climate Action Hub team and also joined by my colleague Isabella here today, helping with our tech, very gratefully having her help here. So we'll be here to help you with anything that you need during the event. These lunchtime learning sessions feed into a larger bit of work that we do as custodians, so to speak, of Forth Valley's Climate Action Hub. And that is to raise awareness of climate actions that can be realised in our area and trying to amplify some of the fantastic work that's already been achieved. So today we're going to hear from Charlotte from Forth Rivers Trust, highlighting the Allan Water project, and then move on to Clare from TCV, who's Scotland's Flooding Resilience Officer, sharing her insights and a bit of work in CLACS. And as I said before, once we hear from both speakers, we'll have a bit of time for some questions, answers, discussions, that kind of thing. So if you do have anything that pops into your head after our first speaker, just pop it in the chat. But otherwise, if you're happy to, I'm going to move on to Charlotte. If you're ready, please start us off.
Great. I'll just share my screen.
We have done a very smooth practice run already.
I know, why is it going on now? Um, right. I'm sharing, but I'm going to end the show, but start it again.
Perfect. That's all looking good.
Can everybody see that okay? Yeah, good.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Well, I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Charlotte Neary. I'm a Senior Project Officer for Forth Rivers Trust. I've been working for the Trust now for nearly 2 years, but before that I spent 23 years working as a conservation officer for the Water of Leaf Conservation Trust. So I've worked my whole life doing conservation and restoration work on rivers in the Forth catchment. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about some natural flood management projects that I've been working on the River Devon and the Allan Water, and hopefully highlight what can be done working with communities, and also talk about some of the successes and the challenges that we've experienced. So diving right in, I suppose I better tell you who Forth Rivers Trust are. So we are a staff team of about 24 people, and we aim to engage people with rivers and wildlife that live within the Forth catchment while conserving rivers and their important species for the future. And we're involved in many projects throughout the whole of the Forth catchment. And that ranges from full-scale restoration of whole catchments and rivers to engaging communities through organised events. So we have a science and research team. We have a river restoration projects team, which is the one that I'm in. We have information support, discussions and monitoring and evaluation that goes along on all our rivers. And we also have a consultancy as well. So there's sort of three arms really to the work that we do. the fourth catchment is made up of 13 rivers. And this is an absolutely lovely map made by the James Hutton Institute for a regional scalability plan that I wrote recently about upscaling river restoration in the fourth catchment. So the fourth catchment itself is 3,000 square kilometres. So that's quite a large area. And the rivers that I'm going to be talking about today are River 2, which is the Allan Water, the yellow one, and River 3, which is the Devon. And these rivers both flow either side of the Ochil Hills, and they drain the Ochil Hills into the Forth River, which goes into the Forth Estuary. Both the River Devon and the Allan Water are very beautiful, much loved rivers. They're home to species like salmon, particularly in the Allan Water, kingfisher, otters, and beaver, to name just a fraction of the wildlife that they support, and they're so crucial for biodiversity. To really hone in on the River Devon now, this is the catchment of this river is actually 195 square kilometres, and you can see in the map that it's the big pink area is the catchment of the Devon. The river itself is 54 kilometres long, and I've already mentioned it rises in the Ochils at Blairdennan Hill. Now, issues on the River Devon are Japanese knotweed and Himalayan balsam, flooding in Pool of Muckart and other hillfoot villages. There are weirs that act as barriers to fish migration, cattle and poaching in the river, and also interventions in the past, which have disconnected the river itself from the floodplain. So it's really the Pools of Muckart project that I wanted to talk about as a case study that I thought you might be interested in. The Pools of Muckart is in the upper reaches of the River Devon. Last year, Forth Rivers Trust worked with the community to deliver a natural flood management and biodiversity enhancement project there, which was funded by the Nature Restoration Fund and the EU project Merlin. It was a lovely project to deliver, and it was born in the community, and everybody in the community helped us deliver the project, and will maintain the interventions now that they've gone in. And basically, there was a steep hill burn that ran off CMAB Hill, came through a farmer's field around the side of the church, flooded people's gardens because it couldn't get through a culvert fast enough in high flow situations. And the community flood group had looked at some hard engineering solutions, but there was nothing that wasn't very, very expensive and very, very intrusive into the natural environment. So they approached Forth Rivers Trust to come up with a natural solution. And we worked with the community at the design stage. And we worked out that we should do a series of leaky dams, some scrapes, some pools, some deflectors, and we all worked together to design it. And we came up with the plan, which is here, and started implementing it in May last year. It was a partnership project, mainly because the community had come to Forth Rivers Trust, and then also Clackmannanshire Council had come to Forth Rivers Trust asking for possible natural solutions. And also the landowners were the Church of Scotland and the Woodland Trust as well. And there was a tenant farmer too. So there was all these people involved in this project to make it happen. Broadly speaking, it was quite a simple project to deliver. Basically, we came in with a single digger and put in a deflector channel over the straightened kind of burn. And so in periods of high flow, that water would flow off into a scrape, which was a very shallow a seasonal pool, up to only about 30 centimeters deep, with a meandering channel that feeds into it. So it sort of looks like a tadpole. You can see the picture at the bottom here of it running. So in high flood, the water hits a wooden timber deflector and runs into this channel and then goes through into the scrape and then permeates slowly through marshy grassland. And then it hits another deflector, which takes it down another channel and into a bit of marshy grassland where there was another 3 scrapes. In the main channel on top of that were 3 log leaky dams. As soon as we put this project in, wildlife came to the scrapes. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. Within weeks, there were dragonflies and damselflies. And when I did my phase 1 habitat survey, I discovered wetland plants quickly becoming more diverse. And also in March, when I did a survey, there were breeding amphibians, so frogs, toads, newt spawn, all in the scrapes. So one of the scrape only flows when it's in flood. 2 of the scrapes always have water in them, and one of them is, again, seasonal. Another one is seasonal. So we've got a real variety of biodiversity and natural flood management. We did hit a problem. There was a challenge. It wasn't all smooth sailing in that the original design had some timber leaky dams on a steep hill burn. And the Woodland Trust, who owned that section of the burn, did not feel comfortable about the log leaky dams going in because they were worried that in a flood situation they would be dislodged and cause further damage. And on top of that, getting a very heavy log up a very steep hill was really, really difficult. So another aspect of the project was that we were doing a living willow fedge around some of the scrapes. And I've done quite a lot of willow spiling along rivers in my work history, and so came up with the idea of creating some living willow leaking dams. Now that was much, much lighter to take up a hill, and it meant that we could really get the community involved in the delivery because it wasn't a digger that did this, we did it all by hand. So we recruited volunteers from TCV, from the local agricultural college, and also from the primary school and from the village itself and the flood group, and everybody came out. We even had some people coming out and learning how to do spiling from a consultancy in this part of Scotland. And then together we just weaved all this willow. We planted and weaved all this willow, and all the stakes were also living as well, 5-year-old living willow stakes. So we put in 6 double layered leaky dams on the steep hill burn, and then another 4 on the flat ground, along with all the other interventions that were in this area. We also did seeding and an education day with the local primary school. They came out and helped us scatter some Scotia wildflower seeds, as well as doing the willow as well. And after we've implemented this project, we've run volunteer sessions with the local flood group to show them how to look after all of the interventions that have gone in, so that they can look after them in the long run. And the interventions aren't too much. They just need to check that the log leaky dams aren't getting blocked, and weave the willow back in as it grows. So it's quite light maintenance, inexpensive project. And I can say that, we put this in it was completed in the summer last year, and there's been a number of storms since, and none of the gardens have flooded since we put it in. So it has been a bit of a success, and we've definitely had a boost in biodiversity in the area too. So that was the project that I really wanted to tell you about on the River Devon. But now I want to move you over to the Allan Water catchment. So this area here is the catchment is actually a little bit bigger than the Devon River, even though the river is shorter. It's 34 kilometres long. The catchment is 217 kilometres squared. And it rises in the Ochils and it goes through Strathallan and Dunbrain and Bridge of Allan before it goes into the Forth. The issues with the Allan are not dissimilar to the Devon in that it's a heavily modified water course due to because to support a growing number of farms, mills, and a railway line. There's a few weirs still in place, acting again as partial barriers to fish migration, and the river has a problem with, this time, giant hogweed. Now, there have been interventions in the past, such as the straightening of the water course, which has removed sort of natural meanders from the river. There's also been dredging and embankments put in, and basically the river has been disconnected from its floodplain. And this has created some flood issues further downstream. In 2017, Forth Rivers Trust was awarded a sort of a rolling grant from the Scottish government, and it's called the Allan Water project. And within that last 7 years, we've delivered over 12 sub-projects. And I'm not going to talk about all the projects here, but I am going to talk a little bit about the projects that have a natural flood management aspect to them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about peatland restoration. I'm going to talk about some wetland creation and some river reconnection. I'm going to talk about leaky dams, riparian tree planting, and hopefully there'll be something there that you will find useful and that you might want to implement in your areas. So peatland restoration, I mean, I know you will all know that peatland restoration is actually crucial for carbon storage and boosting biodiversity, but I don't think everybody considers it as a natural flood management technique as well. But it certainly has a big role to play, and certainly on the Allan Water. Peatlands have been historically drained. Actually, farmers and landowners were encouraged to drain them for more food production in post-war years. This is a very typical Scottish picture of a peatland in Scotland at the moment, where you can see the artificial drains that are cut into the land. And that is basically drying out the peatland and exposing the peat to which means that it's leaching carbon into the atmosphere. It's also meaning that the water is running through the peatland much quicker than it would naturally if the peat wasn't artificially drained. So if we can hold the water, if we can block all those grips and drains and reprofile the hags, we can hopefully hold the water like a giant sponge at the top of the catchment for a bit longer, and all of that will help slow peak flow, so that water doesn't come rushing down all at the same time and flood people's houses. So this is a real, triple purpose project, any kind of peat restoration. But I'm not going to lie, it does have its challenges. It's difficult, first of all, to motivate landowners, because to do a peatland restoration project, there's absolutely tons of paperwork that needs to be filled in. It really is something that you need to do with a few people to take the pressure off you. But if the landowner is also wanting to apply for peatland code and that's the motivating factor, that paperwork needs to be done as well. There's also sort of an impact of deer. So if the land that your peatland is on doesn't have any deer management, it's likely to fail getting funding if the deer isn't under control, because the work that you do in the peatland could be undone by the impacts of deer. When you're doing peatland restoration, it is a short window for works on the ground, because you need to make sure that you're not going to harm any of the ecology in the peatland, so the ground nesting birds. So really, the peak time for doing it is in winter, but of course, working in peatlands can be in quite extreme high locations, really exposed to the elements, and it can create some very difficult working conditions if you are forced to work in the winter for ecological concerns. So that is a bit of a drawback as well. So basically, your work starts in September time and only goes on till you've got to be done by March, and preferably before March, because the weather can get so severe in January and February. And it's hard to find contractors to do the work because it is in such extreme conditions. But it is possible, and we've been doing it, and we're indeed starting to do it now. And if you just sort of chip away at it, it happens. So there's always peatland restoration, but perhaps a little bit more accessible for you all is doing riparian tree planting. So riparian tree planting is great for natural flood management. Basically, you're putting trees along a watercourse. It's obviously soaking up more water, slowing down runoff, slowing down siltation of rivers. It's also creating shade for rivers. I don't know if anybody saw the article in the news over the weekend about brown trout being at risk of extinction by in the next 50 years. And that's really because of the warming of our watercourses. So all fish become very stressed in waters that exceed 18 degrees. So if we look at the pressures of climate change, we're already actually experiencing it, that in the summertime rivers very often exceed temperatures over 18 degrees. So the fish are becoming really stressed. And also they're not cool enough in the summer to in the winter to generate spawning. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent a little bit because really we want to focus on NFM. But if we get trees in the ground, we're going to slow the flow and we're going to help our rivers. Um, but there are challenges. Again, deer comes into this. There's a lot of grazing pressure from deer. So when you're planting riparian trees, you really need to think about protection. So tree stakes or cactus guards or deer fencing. And it's not just pressure from deer, there's also pressures from beavers now. So you really need to think about, what is going to, if you plant loads and loads and loads of trees, what's going to happen to them? You're going to need to check them. You're going to need to maintain them. And I think it's really important to work that into all your budgets if you're doing any riparian tree plantings, however large or small. Always budget in time and money to go back and check your trees and make sure they're not being eaten by something. Make sure the tree tubes haven't got damaged. Make sure that, and that will mean that they grow. Whereas if you just plant them and walk away, you will get quite a big loss probably, and you may not get the results that you want. What's the next thing that I want to talk about? Oh, in this slide, you can see we're already using lots of different forms of tree protection here. So we've got biodegradable tubes. We've trialed cardboard tubes, but in Scotland they don't really work because the elements just completely make them degrade. So we've gone for biodegradable polymers and also wood resin tubes, and they seem to be working much, much better. We've also trialed the use of using sheep's wool. Now, it's good to use sheep wool if you can from an organic source, so they're not, covered with nasty chemicals. But deer don't like the smell of sheep. So if you can, or if you've got the time, if you're just doing a small planting project, it is possible to use organic sheep's wool to put around your trees to stop them from being eaten. I don't mean round the bottom, I mean like all the way up the tree. This year, we're also trialing putting in some rhizocore pellets. So they're little pellets specially made for the catchment that you're planting in, which have a mycorrhizal community in them. So you plant a little mycorrhizal pellet in with your tree, and hopefully that will encourage the trees to link together with fungus underground. I mean, this is just a trial. I've never used these pellets before, but we're starting this year. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they will have the desired results. Certainly love the idea of using mycorrhizal fungus to benefit our tree planting. Now, what we're doing before these trees, if you do tree planting, it's not instantly going to become an NFM or a biodiversity enhancement. It takes, 20, 25 years for trees to get established. One of the things I should have mentioned in the previous slide actually is if you do have pressure from beavers, one thing that's really good to do is to plant a lot of willow from the local environment in and around your trees, because that way the beavers will probably favour some of that willow over the trees that have been planted with guards on them. You can't go wrong planting local willow. It will get established, it will grow, it is great for rivers, it is native, but also it's food for the beavers that will maybe help us to do a little bit, encourage the beavers, but also encourage them not to eat the other trees too. Leaky dam and deflector channels. You've probably heard about leaky dams, and here's a little technical drawing of one. I've already mentioned them in the Pools of Muck Art project. So leaky dams basically mimic what a tree would do if it was growing beside the river and then it fell over the river. You should never really have a leaky dam. You should always leave a gap between the top of the water, and you shouldn't block a river with a leaky dam. It always has to be above the water so that you're allowing the water to pass in periods of normal flow, and fish to pass, crucially, in periods of normal flow. Really, they're just there to hold the water back slightly in periods of high flow. So you need to have that gap between the bottom of the log and the actual river itself. The logs should never be above the riverbank either, because otherwise it's just going to force the water to travel around them, and they won't do what you want them to do. And you have to think about a good location for them. So we've put in about 20 leaky dams in the small tributaries and the upper reaches of the Allan Water in the last couple of years. And they really are, they work best when they're as a few together all in a row. But I'm going to stop talking about it and show you a video of one working, hopefully.
Right, here's Leaky Dam in action, downstream, water's hitting the Leaky Dam, breaking through the embankment, and it's heading away down, away from the barn, heads along the side, and it goes to around the edge of that arable field, and it goes to a wetland, so it's taking the pressure off of this wee barn. So that's working well.
And another thing that we've been doing to sort of mimic what the trees are going to do in 20 years is adding woody debris to rivers as well. So this is a section of the Allan Water very, very upstream. And we've put in very large whole tree trunks onto the river at key locations, which is forcing the river to eat and meander more into the bank. So it's creating meanders in a river that will meander anyway, but it's just speeding it up a little bit. So it's challenging to do this because you have to find an area of river where the landowners either side are either the same or in agreement. Because obviously, if you're making a river meander more, it's going to take some land away from one farmer and give it to another, and vice versa. So it is tricky to find the right location for this, but it can be done. You have to think about the energy of your river as well. So if you've got a very, very high energy river, it's going to move the logs a little bit. They probably won't stay in the bank. It will shift the bags too quickly. And if you have a very slow energy river, it probably won't cause the desired effect quickly enough. It will be, it won't meander because it hasn't got enough energy, regardless of how much woody debris you put in it. I mean, that's not necessarily a problem because wood in rivers is a great in-stream habitat. And we've recorded increased fish spawning and otter activity all around our woody debris on the Allan Water since they've been in. So this woody debris here in this picture has been in since 2020, actually. And it was good because the bank wasn't too erodable. So although some of the logs have moved now, 5 years on, they were in place long enough to cause a faster shift, a faster meander in the river. And this is a natural flood management, because if you have a longer river because it's meandering, again, you're going to slow down peak flow. But one of the major challenges is that, you know, this isn't going to last forever. We've artificially put these logs in the river, and they are, in the next 10 years, it's not treated timber, it's just a natural tree trunk, effectively. They are going to rot away naturally. And that's why I would encourage riparian tree planting, because basically the woody debris and the leaky dams are mimicking natural trees. This is like a stopgap before our riparian trees get established. Nearly there, guys. Other stuff that we've been doing on the Allan Water is keeping water on the floodplain for longer and thus creating wetlands. So we've been, with the landowner's permission, obviously, blocking agricultural drains, stitching and blocking ditches, and we've been creating these seasonal scrapes. So the idea here is that again, these areas of floodplain have been artificially drained for agricultural purposes in the past. And now if we undo that work, it means that the water won't run into the river all at the same time, and it will stagger peak flow, but while creating a wonderful wetland habitat, which is great for wading birds, great for amphibians, great for all sorts of things. It is lovely work to do. It can be challenging, obviously. It's counterintuitive for landowners and farmers to drain their land after they've been told to and have been carrying out to undo all the draining they've been told to do in the past. But we have managed to do this with working with the farmers and to talk to them about possible agri-environment schemes that they might be eligible for, and also obviously on this part of the Allan Water at Green Loaning, there wasn't a very dense sort of agricultural use of the land, so it was quite possible to do it. But we are working with other farmers and suggesting agri-environment schemes and helping them fill out agri-environment schemes, which means they'll get some kind of payment for 5 years after this work goes into place. There's one agri-environment scheme, for instance, which is managing floodplains. When you're doing this kind of thing, you do have to consider their livestock management. Do you need to establish buffer zones around the water features? Are they just going to get really enriched if there's a lot of livestock going into the ponds? And if you're going to do that, are you going to fence them off? Are you going to fence off the buffer zone along the rivers as well? Which is something that we have been doing and working with farmers for, and that can sometimes be quite encouraging, because farmers would like a buffer zone, and they basically we factor it into the project that they will get fencing, and that stops their livestock from going into the river. But if you are doing that, you must consider whether that part of the river has invasive non-native species. I'll talk a little bit more specifically about inns right at the end of the talk. But one thing that we've been considering is if we have inns on our rivers and we put in a buffer zone, were the cattle and the sheep eating the inns before? And if we extract them from the edge of the watercourse, are the inns just going to take over? So should they be controlled and managed before we start establishing buffer zones? So something to consider anyway. Now, all of these projects need funding. They don't happen for free, unfortunately. And actually, there's been a little bit of a lack of funding this year because there's been no Nature Restoration Fund delivery grants in 2025. Now, that's forced Forth Rivers Trust to look at the private investment kind of area. And what I would urge you to do if you do go down that line is really, really think about your outcomes and make sure that they're realistic, because it's very tempting to say, oh, I'm going to do this nature restoration project. It's a natural flood management project and it's going to boost biodiversity massively. But you know, what realistically is it going to look like from a biodiversity point of view in 10 years' time? Because if you put it in and it's a sort of blown out of proportion, it's actually could become greenwashing because they'll be using these projects to offset something else that they're doing in another place. So you have to be very realistic about what your outcomes will be. I just want to have another video now to show you of a sort of a wetland scrape, overflow wetland scrape in action. Because I'll try and explain it with photos, and I just think it's better to see the real thing on a film.
Right, this is the Allan Water coming downstream from Panholes. I'm standing on Deaf now, and here, just between those trees, and where you can see the puddle on the right hand side, that's where the water's coming out. And this is our channel, and there it is, coming out along the channel, floodplains in front of us, and right along the channel. Now, where it goes from there, I'm not exactly sure, but at least the water is getting onto the floodplain. And this is Sunday, the day after, or actually the afternoon after the really heavy rains the last 2 days. So it is working, but I don't know how much it was taken in yesterday. It was just too wild to come up here.
So I'm nearly finished. One quick word about non-native plant species, which I'm sure you've all familiar with. I would encourage the control of this plant in your areas wherever possible, and they can result in natural flood management. Now, you must always control in species from a top of the catchment working downstream approach, because anything else will recolonize if you don't get it from the top and work down systematically. But the thing about inns is they become a monoculture on your riverbanks and then basically just die in the winter, leaving a really exposed riverbank, which then washes away and erodes and silts the river. If you don't have a lot of diversity of structure as well as diversity of plant species on your riverbank, you won't have as much friction, which again causes the river to run more quickly within its floodplain. So get rid of inns. It is an NFM2 and work from the top down. That's it for me. Sorry, I've run over a little bit. Don't ask me any questions yet, because I think we're going to do Claire's talk and then we'll have questions at the end.
Thank you, Charlotte. That was really, really amazing and informative. And yeah, just to assure anyone who has to leave super on time, if you pop any questions in the chat, I'm happy to do sort of an email listing to the Eventbrite signups after with the questions answered or something like that, if that helps you a bit. And very happy to welcome Claire. Thank you, Claire, if you're happy to start sharing.
Yep, thank you. Just check you can all hear me okay? Yep. I will share my PowerPoint. Lovely to hear Charlotte and her updated of what she's been doing. We do try and work closely with other partners and have been supporting where we can on the River Devon. So it's always good to share with our volunteers and other people we have in contact with what's happening and why. Now I'm going to see, right, can you see my slides?
Yeah, that looks
great. Okay. So I'm with the Conservation Volunteers, which has been going since 1959, over 65 years. And we're a national organisation, but we have a local impact. Our projects are all local based, driven by the needs of the local environment and local people rather than a national hierarchy, although we are funded through the Scottish Government NRF funding where it's allowed. We're all about connecting people and green spaces and having a positive impact on both. The 4 outcomes that we focus on as a conservation charity is obviously the environment and improving the biodiversity where possible, but also realising that the local community has to take ownership, just like Charlotte was saying. In a lot of the NRF sorry, not NRF, the National Flooding Maintenance has to come from local communities in order to ensure these plans work longer term, and to realise and appreciate that nature does change over time. So you have to keep what works in the first 2, 3, 4 years isn't the same as what will work come 10, 15 years down the line. So there's an element of helping community members of all ages to understand that, as well as some skilling up for them, either learning more about biodiversity or the skills required to help them appreciate and take better care of their environment. From that, they also gain a lot of health and well-being, both physically and mentally themselves, which, given the concerns about anxiety about our climate crisis, is something that I think we all need to be aware of, especially in the younger generation. So as we talk away from biodiversity action and climate positive action and action for resilience in separate silos, it's all about bringing together and recognising interventions have a multiple lot of outcomes. So just for TCV, our green space outputs, we've planted over 53,000 trees in 23-24. And like Charlotte says, they're about creating new habitats, but it's also about improving biodiversity, as well as absorbing and slowing water if they're planted with a view to looking at the water catchment. Significantly in the riparian zones, cooling effects in the rivers, because obviously increasingly our animals and wildlife in rivers is significantly being affected by climate change, as well as having an effect on us ourselves in urban areas. So using nature in a variety of ways to benefit both nature and people as well, rural and urban areas. So we've also created 32,500 metres squared of wildflower meadow, ensuring our pollinators have a chance. And again, with the range of species increasing the effects of holding water in the area, so the surface water can stay on the surface longer, and limiting the peak flow, which is always the issue and concern, especially from those areas which maybe are at the bottom of water courses, where naturally in the past you've had local villages spring up to use that water for industrial means, and as a result now we're finding that they're more prone to flooding. And I working closely with the Hillfoots villages in Clackmannanshire, so either side of where Charlotte was talking about, from the Allan Water and the Devon, that the catchment, the Ochils, are a natural place the rain falls most intensely, and the Hillfoot villages were created and built up because they had rivers running through them. And 200 years ago, that was great for industry. And now it's causing some challenges around flooding in those villages for certain residents. So the other thing, again, reiterating what Charlotte's saying about invasive species removal. So far, TCB, with our volunteers, has removed over 25,000 metres squared. And as she was saying, it's all about reducing the monocultures, with the concern that in winter, when they die back, because most of them are herbaceous, then you have a really vulnerable river bank that can easily, with a heavy impact of rain that's now falling, it silts up the rivers, it erodes the banks. And obviously in water and drought conditions, it also doesn't help, because many of the roots are they're quite shallow rooted, especially things like Himalayan balsam, which is the source at the Devon, which doesn't help retain any water in drought conditions. We manage woodland and help volunteers to do so Again, offering free trees in one of our national campaigns that's on at the minute. We've managed 88,000 metres squared of woodland, not only the sort of the tallest level of species, but the understory and healthy woodlands running along that and helping people to understand all the processes that occur in that woodland to increase biodiversity, as well as a well-managed woodland also being more resilient for climate change and better able to cope in storms and heavy downpours. And the other thing we do a lot of is trying to just make sure people have access to getting outside and do so responsibly. So much of what we do, it's great if you're a landowner or you're linked to a project where you can get out and about, but many people can't. So it's trying to encourage those people through TCB volunteering to create paths, maintain them, and help maybe those who are harder to reach, further away from engaging with nature, to come out and enjoy and understand why it's so worthwhile looking after their local environment. They also, from a people perspective, we want to help improve community cohesion locally, but also that people feel better. As I think probably all of us here appreciate, being outside is good for your health, both physically and mentally. And some people, it's often a bit scary. So we try and engage, do fun activities that allow people to get more connected. And that is one of the biggest percentages. People feel, over 90% of people feel they're more connected. They're more confident. They can visit green space. They're learning new skills. They're feeling more connected with the community. Improving their mental and physical well-being all ties into building resilience, not just for themselves, not just for their local community, but for their local landscape and nature as well. So together we make the world a better place, but locally. And my role is a community flood resilience lead, supporting community groups across Scotland. Flooding is the most significant challenge in Scotland as it adapts to climate change that the council has, sorry, not the council, the government and all local authority councils have a remit to kind of focus on. We can think just, my goodness, well, think of Storm Babette in Aberdeenshire last year, in 2023 now, sorry, that also had an impact in Stirling Council locally, and was closely monitored in Clacks. Like, no flooding occurred, but that was, there were sandbags out and lots of resilience groups on high alert in Clacks as a result of that. And just thinking recently about Storm Éowyn, brought most of the Central Belt under the red warning, threat to life. It was about wind damage, but it included flooding in the West Coast due to a risk of storm surge. And in the flood resilience groups that I'm in contact with, a lot of people went out ahead of the storm and checked all the drainage channels were clear of debris, especially from, say, fallen branches or litter that might limit or block drainage channels and put homes at risk. We also probably across the board remember lots of New Year celebrations were cancelled and rail services disrupted due to the risk of flooding this year. So it's having an impact for all of us. We're getting wetter, milder winters, drier summers, but more extreme weather events. And as a result, the Meteorological Office, the predictions are not good. Sea levels are set to rise between 80 centimetres and 1.9 metres higher than current levels by 2100, I should say, and the rainfall intensity is suggested to increase up to 50%, with a peak river flow increasing to 60%. So all the natural flood management measures we can do, as well as the more hard structural ones that councils can implement, will be for our good, for our communities. And as a result, the Scottish Government has recently come up with a flood resilience strategy as part of the what's called, they call SNAP 3, which is the Scottish National Adaptation Plan, that links biodiversity in it, as well, as we realise we've got to make, there's very little funding, whereas we're all trying to build and develop an adaptive Scotland, both in terms of on our landscape, for our nature, but also for our communities. So around the community flood resilience, one thing, there's 3 outcomes. It's based around people, places, and process. And it's all about informing and supporting individuals and communities to be involved. So it's wonderful that we've had Charlotte today talk about how local communities have got involved in Muckert and other places across the Allan Water. But often it's the people further downstream that maybe are only able to look at their small patch of land or are in urban areas. And I guess that's where TCV comes in, and we try and say, okay, so you might not own a lot of land, but you can still do something to help and improve not only biodiversity, but also manage your flood risk for yourself, but also in your local park, your local school, your local community group. And it's working with local partners to ensure that local land management decisions include something about flood resilience, but also biodiversity improvement at the same time. And the processes should involve, from the Scottish Government perspective, they want to involve the next generation, our young people, but also those who maybe have a disability, who aren't already engaged in nature as it is. And TCV does try to reach those hard to reach groups with our partners and make them as much aware of the need for everybody to adapt. So far, this project's been running I've been running this project for about 18 months. It's part-time, and my work so far has involved a lot of work with schools, as you can see. This is our flood resilience officer explaining how the local river in Menstrie works, and just getting kids out. So many kids don't understand the river as a living, changing entity. So it was trying to get them to understand and see the difference, see the erosion happening, understand that it is like lots of not just the species in the river, but also in the surrounding riparian zone as well, complement each other to build up a whole ecology there in their very own village. They don't need to go far to see this, and understand and appreciate what the river does in each of the stages, as well as seeing how nature has a nice balance there. With that, we then talked about the flooding that occur in Menstrie, which does happen, and what they can do themselves to be prepared. We talked about creating grab bags, and they discussed with their teacher about what they would put in those bags. So it's helping communities and individuals not to be scared of the river, but to appreciate, take action, and be forewarned and forearmed to know what to do if and when flooding does occur. Not only that, we've been talking to different groups about spiling. So like Charlotte, we came and helped up at Muckert. You were engaged with the Muckert community, and we have a group that plugs into just environmental change and measures across clacks. And we invited, with your colleague, I think it was Charlotte, that we went up and helped the volunteers that we work with to get to Muckert and to do some willow spiling and help them understand further upstream from where they live what's being done from a natural flood management perspective that's going to help everybody further downstream. Obviously, it's a small tributary, and it's just sowing a seed to help people appreciate there are other things happening in the landscape that maybe isn't directly linked to them, but has an impact in a positive way for them wherever they are living at the moment. And it gives them some skills they too learnt some willow spiling skills that can be then applied elsewhere. And this is a group, this is actually in Edinburgh, where they're also doing some willow spiling along a river. Charlotte might know it, I don't know. Because it's all part of the fourth catchment. So one of the things that I try and get people to think about is not just their tiny little space, but that we're all talking about a bigger catchment-wide approach, because it's together, when we work together, that we'll have best impact and most improvements for biodiversity as well at the same time. We also plant trees, and this is in Mulgai. So again, it's part of the Forth River catchment. And another thing that we do is, maybe for those less able to get out and about themselves, is to be using citizen science to spot pinch points in the river system in their area that's agreed with local council flooding teams and resilience teams. And if there's anything that's blocking a natural waterway or drainage channel or culvert that's going to have a negative impact, to ask that they flag that up to myself or to a flood resilience champion, and that enables those in the council who can manage this kind of flow or drainage to manage that safely, so as it's not causing further blockages in the flow of the river that would have a negative impact on their area or their town. And that happens in a number of the hillfoot villages in Clacks, and we're exploring and getting more kids involved in Stirling schools, and hopefully those coming forward are also in Edinburgh as well. So it's all about an understanding with what we are having to adapt to. We also have other project areas, but I am aware of time, so I'll go through these very quickly. That's the main flooding project, and I can offer to support any community group to learn about flooding and help people to look after themselves, their communities, as well as taking some actions that will benefit their local community, be it tree planting or wildflower meadow planting or sowing or removal of invasive species. And it could be coming up with a plan with other partners, such as Forth Rivers Trust or one FEL or the local council. Usually do it in conjunction with one of a landowner. If we're doing it on specific land, obviously it has to include the landowner, but also working out what's going on there so as to have best impact for those individuals, be it a school group or a community group. We also have biodiversity action teams, and they are engaging a range of people from across central Scotland, giving them hands-on opportunities. I'm the senior project officer for work in Clackmannanshire, and again, it's all about improving biodiversity and building climate and resilience while improving your health and well-being. We deliver Nature Networks actions, which is around tree planting, wildflower meadow creation, woodland management, pond creation and management, removal of invasive and non-native species, and creation of urban green space infrastructure. So very similar, and you can see how that ties into what Charlotte said with the natural flood management. The citizen science project is learning about and recording nature around you. So it's super when you have someone like Charlotte who's got the dedication and time to say how an area has been improved, but often it's just about trying to get people more involved and excited about that in their day-to-day, and helping people who maybe are amateurs but want to improve their knowledge and understanding of how their biodiversity is improving in their local area. So we have a citizen science colleague who comes and runs group sessions, and it can be specific, like Hogwatch, improving an understanding about the health of our hedgehog population, as well as why trees that are dead are a good thing and shouldn't be cleared away, and encouraging people to really see them as a new habitat that's part of the cycle of life that we should all be taking care of. And be that clearing their garden or a local wood, that, you know, it's a good thing, and helping people to understand that more. So we provide training courses, ID workshops, and CPD for practitioners and teachers. We also are working with the Forth and Clyde Climate Forests. Again, it's a strategic tree planting initiative that local community groups and schools can get involved in. The focus being on increasing the rate of canopy to cover 20% across communities, providing woodland corridors whereby species can travel, so creating effectively the motorways and the roads for the wildlife to travel through. In the longer, medium to long term, obviously it helps with carbon sequestration. And at the same time, if we can involve different community groups for them to feel they are part of something bigger, then that builds more stronger and resilient communities across the way, which is one of our key objectives. We also offer free trees. So if you're interested and have been inspired by what you've heard today, please do look at our website and or get in contact, and we can talk more about how you can do your bit. These come through funding at a national level, but it's available to all community groups until the end of March. They're native tree packs, and there's a different sort of range of species depending on your requirements. Here it's part of the I Dig Trees campaign. It's been running for 6 years, and a total of 550,800 trees have been planted. Every one of those little happy tree icons represents a pack that's been sent out, and you can see that in time people are planting trees. I think the fact that you have more and more people getting engaged, it's also about understanding how you look after those trees as well. And it's a learning process. So if we can support that, then do get in touch with us for that. We also provide a community network that's free, which gives online resources, access to our handbooks that were written before the Wildlife Trusts came into being, as well as support and guidance covering things like health and safety and other insurance that many local community groups don't have, which is advisable, and some regular newsletters that can support funding and other inspiring ideas round Scotland for how to improve your local nature and environment. So far, that's all our groups. Tend to be in the Central Belt, but yes, even if we're not where you can get us, this community network allows you to feel connected and can plug into what we can learn from each other. And we also have a Chestnut Fund. It's grant funding for grassroots community groups to help them deliver practical volunteering, specifically for improving the natural physical environment and connections between people and green spaces. They're small, they're startup, but if you're finding that a problem and a challenge, then this is a good place to look. Thank you very much. That's me.
Thank you both. I think, both such complement of information today, and just such a rich idea of what's happening in Forth Valley as well. So thank you so much. It's been so interesting. Both of you have had like really, really important things covered. And I think I just reflect, with these adaptation skills sessions, we're really just scratching the surface. As we've seen, there is so much that you can go into depth and really be inspired with and get interested and involved with. So thank you for most of you staying on a bit longer. I appreciate that. Just opening it up if anyone has any questions for our speakers. Feel free to pop your hand up or in the chat. think there really is so much there. I did have one question from Zoom, but I feel like you've sorry, from the Eventbrite chat. It was what other ways can flood be managed despite the present mitigation measures? But um, I mean, I feel like you have highlighted a good number of uh, of different ways of managing it, a particular focus on the nature-based ones there. They did also have a mention of uh, managing our relationship with flooding as like a natural disaster. Um, I know you've referenced it a bit, Claire, probably in your work. Talking to schools and things and really managing also that the overwhelming aspect of, fear of flooding and that being seen as quite a, even in narrative, flooding is one of those disasters to be quite a scary topic to tackle or approach. Um,
Yes, I mean it is. We went to the National Flooding kind of conference that the Scottish Government sponsor, and that's run through called Sniffer, and they had a speaker who'd been flooded, who it's very real, it's very scary, and every time it rains, she's now concerned. So it has a huge, not just physical impact on your home, but also mental impact, lasting mental impact. And I think actually one of the things that we are in the same way we all train to do fire. Everyone knows about, the fire alarm shouldn't go, but what to do in a case of a fire. And I've lived in Japan, and they've got a similar thing for earthquakes. I think this is the sort of thing we do have to we do have to start thinking about and saying, right, we need to be being realistic and being prepared and saying, you can mitigate, but actually you need to be prepared for flooding or any kind of disaster. As you can see, COVID kind of highlighted the fact that we need to build resilience in our communities, and there are community resilience groups who aren't specific to flooding, but are generally trying to just build resilience across all people. And one of the things out of the Sniffer conference was, if you engage with those, such as those who are disabled or those who are younger, in some way more vulnerable than your average population, you will automatically help improve all the population from putting in plans and ideas and actions that will benefit the most vulnerable. And I think natural flood management is a way that you can do it at different scales. And one of the things that is key is to give people hope and some form of action that they can take ownership of. And that will be localized, but part of that is education, and be that through the Forth Rivers Trust and the superb work, because you do Fish Comes to Schools, which was fantastic. We got thanks to very kind donations. One of the groups I was talking in Menstrie about flooding, the Forth Rivers Trust came along and taught the kids about, they had to grow fish and pop them in the river and release them. And so it became alive, and it was positive as well as a risk. So I think it's that general understanding that nature is complex, but it's good for us as well as risky. But we can't have that kind of complex conversation and understanding unless we know what to do and how to keep ourselves safe, but not to see nature as the problem. It's part of the solution. And I think the natural flood management systems enable us to do that. And if we can get people excited and really just see how rich a resource we all take for granted, then that will help. But there's no easy options. It is scary. It can be scary. And I think it's about realizing how complex and amazing world we all live in, is what we can mainly hope for. Charlotte, what do you think from your long experience of looking at biodiversity.
More of a final reflection, isn't it, really?
I just love the projects can, you know, they're there's so many results that can come from a natural flood management project, because it's not only kind of building climate resilience and flooding and drought resilience, but it's also boosting biodiversity and bringing communities together as well. So you know, multiple benefits. It can only be a good thing.
Yes, well, thank you. It's a really nice place to leave off, I think, and definitely got a lot of energy from all seeing that community development aspect in all of those projects you demonstrated. Really inspiring, really informative, and huge thanks for coming along today. And huge thank you for everyone.
Mm.
Yeah, a huge thank you for everyone for coming along. And as we say, we'll put the video up online and on our website. So feel free to check back in on that, and we'll have links to all the resources as well. And we'll put the presentations up. So thank you again for everyone for joining us.
Thank you. Sorry for freezing at the end.
Bye.
Thank you.